If I said you could spend eternity with Jesus, but you have to give up everything, literally everything. You have to give up your home and be homeless until the day you die. You have to give up your friends and be lonely. You'll be hungry every single day as long as you live. You'll be cold in the winter as you live without a home and without possessions. Would it be worth it to you? Would you do that for an eternity with Jesus? Well, Jesus in Matthew chapter 13 talks about something called the kingdom of heaven. And the kingdom of heaven is something you see very frequently that Jesus is teaching about while he's here on earth. So what exactly is he talking about? Well, remember that Matthew is showing how Jesus is the fulfillment of all of the Old Testament. And a lot of the Old Testament promises were promising this king who would one day come, this king who would set up his throne and his kingdom forever. And if Jesus is fulfilling those promises, it means that Jesus has come to be a king. And there's a promise that one day people will live in this kingdom of heaven for eternity with Christ as their king. And others, the people who are not in that kingdom, will be judged for their sin and punished eternally. Well, Jesus teaches about what the eternal kingdom is like and how those people end up in it. So let's look in Matthew 13, verse 44. He says, "The kingdom of heaven is like treasure hidden in a field, which a man found and covered up. And then in his joy, he goes and sells all that he has, and he buys that field." The kingdom of heaven is like treasure that is in a field. Let's imagine this guy, he lives in a small home, drives a Toyota Corolla. He goes, he's digging in a field for some reason. I don't know why. But he comes across this incredible treasure. It's just a chest full of gold and treasures, and it's something incredible. What's he going to do? If this treasure is worth far more than anything he has now, he's going to sell everything. He's going to sell all of it, and he's going to go and he's going to buy that field so that he can have that treasure. Why? Because it's more valuable than anything that he owns now. When someone sees the real value of the kingdom of heaven, everything else in their life becomes secondary. Everything else in their lives becomes less valuable because they recognize the true value of heaven. He goes on in verse 45, again, "The kingdom of heaven is like a merchant in search of fine pearls, who, on finding one pearl of great value, went and sold all that he had, and he bought it." So this is a guy that he's making a living out of finding pearls, and he finds this one pearl that's better than anything else he's ever found. And he's like, "I'm going to give it all up. I'm going to sell everything for this pearl." Now, these guys would be crazy if they saw this treasure and that pearl, and they said, "You know what? I like my little house. I like my Toyota Corolla. I'd hate to give that up." They would be fools to do that, because this treasure could buy them a beautiful mansion and a Ferrari or something like that. Like this treasure is so much more valuable than anything that they have. It's worth them selling everything. Well, eternity with Christ, the kingdom of heaven, is infinitely greater than any of the temporary things that we could have in this life. Any temporary comforts, any temporary joys that we have in this life, it's worth all of them. We ought to be willing to lose literally everything for the sake of eternity with Christ. Now, I want to be really clear. We don't get to Christ by doing the work of giving away things. Like, I'm not saying you have to get as poor as possible, and that's the only way that you're gonna reach heaven. No, what I'm saying is that the things that we value and the things that we live our lives for will change. If we want to spend eternity with Christ, our hearts need to not be attached to the things of this world, to our worldly possessions, to our worldly comforts and our worldly joys. Instead, our hearts are attached to Christ. And so whatever it costs us, even if it costs us our home, our friends, our health, our family, whatever it is, if our heart is truly attached to Christ, we will realize that he is far more valuable than any of it, and it's worth every single penny. We should be willing to give everything up for the kingdom of heaven, for eternity with Jesus.